What is the connection between the nervous system and chronic illnesses like diabetes, cancer, and metabolic issues? Stay tuned to this video to find out more. Welcome back, my friends. My name is Sarah. I am known as Carnivore Yogi. Thank you so much for being here and clicking on today's video. Today, I have an interview with my friend Irene Lyon and a returning guest. She's actually been on the show a couple of times before, where we've really gone into nervous system healing. And today we wanted to dive into a lot of the DIY things that people are doing for the vagus nerve, because people are starting to understand this connection between chronic illness and the nervous system. But Irene is starting to see, as a practitioner, a lot of people being damaged by these practices. So there is a lot in this episode. Make sure you check out the timestamps in the show notes below. It's going to give you a little roadmap to navigate through this episode. And make sure to check out the links I'm going to put for Irene's programs down in the show notes. She's actually offering a $47 Zoom session introduction to her work. If you're unsure if you want to take the dive and actually purchase a program, that's going to be offered exclusively to a few amount of people. So if you're interested in that, again, check out the links down in the show notes to sign up for that. And I want to thank my two sponsors of today's episode. The first one is going to be Fever Rays. Now these are the clip and go glasses. I love these because you only need to buy one pair of glasses to have day lenses, evening lenses, and then your night lenses. So you can use my code YOGI to save 15% at Fever Rays, and they are my go-to for circadian rhythm protection. There is a host of science now that shows artificial light has also been linked to obesity, cancer, metabolic disorders, and so many other problems. So that is why my go-to, again, is Viva Rays for protecting my circadian rhythms. You can use my code YOGI to save 15% over at Viva Rays. The second sponsor of today's episode is going to be Optimal Carnivore. Now this is what I use to fill in any nutritional gaps. This is their organ meat complex. You can use my code carnivore uppercase Y to save 10% over at Optimal Carnivore. And again, I take these, my daughter takes these. These have been great prenatally, and they are just a really wonderful way to fill in any nutritional gaps. Again, make sure you check out all those timestamps as well as Irene's links, especially if you've been on the fence about trying any of her programs. Thank you guys again for watching, and I will talk with you again soon. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. I am really excited to have my good friend Irene Lyon here with me today. She's been on the show a few times. I'll link all those shows in the show notes for you guys. But, you know, Irene and I were just chatting, and there's so many of these biohacks for the nervous system that are becoming really popular. And I just wanted to have you on to kind of go through some of those, talk about some of those, and what you're seeing from the viewpoint of somebody who really is working with the nervous system.
Mm-hmm. It's a big topic, Sarah. So I'm glad we're having this conversation. And I know we did one earlier this year where we talked about ice baths and that. And I mean, that's a good one for another person, for someone to listen to if they want to listen to that. Definitely. Because, you know, I think that there's a time and a place for certain biohacks, you know, and what I think is important to know is for us to know when are those important and when are those not really good to be, like, when should we stay clear from them? And in my experience, and I've been doing this work for a little while, it's kind of been interesting the last couple of years, because I've been teaching and working with the nervous system at the level that I do, and we'll talk about that, no doubt, since, 2012, 2011, 2009, when I really started to get into the somatic experiencing work with Peter Levine and all that. And no one really knew about the nervous system.
Right.
I even had a website coach say to me in the early days, you shouldn't put the word nervous system on your website. True story.
What?
But you have to understand, this was back in about 2012. And it was not common knowledge, kind of the way meditation and yoga wouldn't have been in the 50s.
Right.
Right. And so we're at a time now, fast forward 10 years, really. 10 years.
Yeah.
And now I kind of joke, everyone and their dog and cat and canary want to work with their nervous system. They want to heal their nervous system because they know that's where trauma sits. And we now know that trauma, if not healed, will potentially, if not most likely, lead to chronic illnesses, addictions, all the things, mental illness. So everyone wants it. Everyone wants to heal their nervous systems and heal their traumas. And I get it. And so what's occurred, I've seen in the last couple of years, if people are trying to figure out how to make a shortcut.
How do we hack it?
How do we hack?
Everything is biohacking now,
Yep.
Yeah.
How do we hack this? How do we get into that one thing and change it? And the one thing that I know and is that the system is a whole and things cascade. I mean, you've gotten so into hormones. It's like, you can't just talk about one hormone. You have to look at how they intertwine and different times of a person's life and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you're pregnant right now, so your hormones are going to be different than mine. And so this idea of biohacking the nervous system is dangerous.
Yeah, I was going to say dangerous.
And I'll give you a story. And this is a story I get a lot, probably once a week through DM or various messages, is someone will say, I wanted to try some somatic work. I love your work. And I think when I hear that, they're looking at my Instagram feed, quick little things, right?
YouTube channel.
And that's fine. That's fine. For some reason, they don't make it to my website. Maybe that's my fault because I'm not good at promoting my website, but they don't make it to my site and they don't find my free resources that are very basic, connecting to the environment, learning how to feel the ground under us. As I even say that, everyone can do that right now. Like, can you feel your body? Can you sense your movements? Can you feel your breath? Blah, blah, blah. And so what happens is, for some reason, they don't get to those resources that I've created that are basic and very entry level and safe, fairly safe.
Yeah.
They go to YouTube or Google and they look up exercises to heal the nervous system, or exercises to heal the vagus nerve, or exercises to release trauma. And of course, if you pop that up, there will be probably millions of hits, hundreds of millions of hits, with tapping exercises, toning exercises, I don't do this, but trauma release exercises where you're forcing a muscle into a certain position so it starts to tremor. Breath work, which has a place.
Right.
So for me, breath work has a place as a practice.
Yes.
To expand and to bring, oxygen and get the blood going. That's a practice, just like exercise is a practice.
Right.
But I wouldn't say to someone, go do 10 bicep curls to heal your nervous system, even though your nervous system is making your biceps work.
Yes, exactly.
And so what has happened, and I just got another one of these messages the other week, Irene, I really want to do your work. I wanted to try some somatic techniques before I bought your course. So I did some vagal toning exercises that I found online. And you know what these are, Sarah, because I teach them, but I teach them in a very subtle, titrated way.
Yeah, in a contained way.
And at like week 8.
Right. It's not it's not the just first thing that you do when you get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they did what was probably something like a toning where you're doing a deep like om or vu or ah, like that does stimulate. It can stimulate, or it can actually overactivate parts of the vagus nerve if a person or has an existing nervous system that's dysregulated. So this person did this, again, not their fault. They didn't know. They probably followed it to a T. My hunch is the person teaching didn't do any grounding techniques, or don't do this if you know you have chronic illness or you have an autoimmune or whatever. So they did it, and their system went through what I can best describe as a complete added activation, dysregulation. They dropped into a deep depression. Their temperature went completely freezing cold, which is a sign that their system went into shutdown. They started to shake. They started to, like, everything just went wonky.
Oh, wow.
And so what happened is this person took their existing dysregulated low capacity nervous system, because, that's just how lots of people are, and they're wanting to fix this stuff. They do this exercise with good intention.
Right.
And I have no doubt that the person teaching it has good intention, but they don't know these nuances of how our system is very fragile when we have this dysregulation. And it put them into a deeper, I'll use a fancy word, but a deeper dorsal, high tone dorsal, the parasympathetic, which is this freeze response. That explained the drop in temperature, all these things, the feeling of depression, and just like everything. And then that flipped with activation, if I can recall. But the gist of the story is this person, well-meaning, wanting to fix their nervous system through this hack of the vagus nerve through toning, went in and did it, and it didn't go well. And then and thankfully they contacted me, and I was like, well, this might be why. Please try my free stuff on my site.
Yeah.
But it's a very common thing. And my worry, Sarah, is that people are trying these hacks and techniques that are there, and then they think this somatic work is crazy.
Yeah. Or that it doesn't work.
Or that it doesn't work. Or that I must be so broken, because everyone is saying that this is calming them the moment they do that. And for some, they might feel a calming response depending on the capacity they already have to feel all of the shifts internally. But if you don't have a map for how to feel those shifts internally, you're like, it's almost like you're being put in the middle of a country that no language, you don't know any of their customs, and it's chaos. And you're like, get me the heck out of here.
Yeah. I mean, I am remembering back to when I first started taking yoga classes. I had to be in the hot, extreme, I had to take the hard yoga classes. That was all I could handle. If you put me in a class where it was the teacher talking in this like yoga voice and all kind, and, I wanted to break out of that room. I wanted to scream. I wanted to jump out of my body. I could not handle it. No. And then I'd look around and everyone else is like, oh, I'm so relaxed. And I would just be like, someone tell this woman to shut up and get me out of here. And I didn't understand, I just thought there's something wrong with me. I didn't understand that this is something going on with my nervous system, and that this is not safe for my body. My body is not feeling safe in this environment. And there's literally nothing wrong with me. It's just that it's activating something within me. And there's a different way that needs to go about this. And then when I became a teacher, and I would try to teach those classes, and everyone would be like, oh, I love the class so wonderful. But then there'd be that one person that would storm out of the room. I'd be like, oh, because it would happen. You'd have people run out of the room crying. You'd have people storm out of the room. You'd have people angry, like every now and then, not often enough for me to think that, I'm a bad teacher or whatever. It's just like something got to their nervous system. And no one really teaches about this. And I took the trauma informed course and was taught about how to language and how to do this. But still, when you bring somebody into that sort of a space, there's a lot of groundwork that has to be done. There's a lot of intelligence that you have to have around the nervous system. And so, I think some of these
live and learn.
and going on YouTube and trying to do these types of exercises. I mean,
I liken it to, and this is going to sound like an extreme example, but I liken it to trying to learn how to do some kind of internal surgery, like a doctor would with 6 years of training in a medical school, trying to do surgery by learning off of YouTube.
Right.
And someone's like, oh, Irene, like, don't be silly. That isn't what you're doing. You're not doing surgery with this nervous system work. But the interesting thing is, in many ways we are. It's just not visibly invasive with scalpels and potential of bleeding out.
Yep.
But people do, and I say this with air quotes for those that are just listening, some people do bleed out, air quotes, when they go into these practices having no foundation, no awareness of what they're storing inside. I just got a note from the other day from a man on our Facebook page who is better now, but he went in, he did the bleeding out thing. I mean this metaphorically, after an ayahuasca ceremony.
Oh gosh.
And it broke him in half, couldn't function. And the amount of times I've heard that story from people doing various plant medicines, psychedelics, ecstasy. And again, those are very useful when done properly in a context that is foundationally secure, and the person has some capacity already.
Right.
And so it is in some ways surgery, because we're working with these nerves that are in our body that have maybe been dormant or have been frazzled. And it's like you're taking these things and we're shaking the person to try to heal and wake up, without even saying, well, why are we doing this? Like, what's the issue? Why do you have gut problems? Why do you have anxiety? Why are you intensely afraid of going into the public space and being seen? Like, this isn't just because of your vagus nerve. Right. This is a whole organismic situation that usually came from our early days. And all the things that we were subjected to, whether it was actual abuse, which is a real thing and happens a lot, as we know through the research, or a little one who had a broken bone or something at birth and they had to go into surgery over and over again. That is a huge trauma as well. And then of course we have all the societal things that condition us to not express our needs. And our parents were taught not how to do that. And so we've got all these things. It's more than just hacking one little nerve or one little part of the brain.
Yeah, people don't understand how complex things are. And I know I've had some requests to talk to your husband about just men in the United States, how they've been traumatized, you know, from birth, and having a boy here in a few weeks, navigating that and trying to make a convincing, understanding statement that just because you're doing something surgically to a baby that everyone does here, that doesn't mean it doesn't traumatize them. That doesn't mean it doesn't change them for life, you know? And it's just so widely accepted and just done. But there, you know, we don't acknowledge things like that. You know, and when you're going through these surgical procedures as a baby or a child, you're defenseless. You know,
not many. Well, it wasn't even until recently that there was an acknowledgement that babies feel. You know, and it's like, they don't need anesthesia, they don't need freezing. You know, whether it's what you're talking about, which I know exactly.
They still don't do anesthesia for that.
And so the thing it's crazy. And the thing that is so difficult is if we're not teaching the mass populace, and especially the healthcare providers, that this is going to impact the somatic system. Believe what you want to believe, but this is impacting the somatic system, no matter what religious, faith, energetic, it's impacting the system. Just like if I was a baby and I had my toe cut off, that's going to impact me and I'm going to feel it. Ugh, it just makes me sick thinking about that. So it's like, we would not do that. It's a functional part of the human system. It's there for a reason. But the surgery thing is interesting. I just posted a story article of my surgical experiences, not in full detail, but the resolution of what I think was a lifetime of being under anesthesia for various surgeries, starting from tonsils all the way to wisdom teeth taken out to knee surgeries galore, which, you know, I had one just last year for something. And
Yep.
even though those surgeries weren't traumatic and I wasn't fighting, you know,
Right.
I never woke up during the surgery, which again
Oh,
is
that happens.
so common. And for
Yep.
anyone listening to this, if that happened to you, please, you know that that wasn't your fault, and do the work if it's with me or another somatic practitioner who's very trained to work with that, because it can cause all sorts of troubles like sleep apnea, panic attacks at night, horrific nightmares that never go away. Yeah, I could talk about that for a long time, but what has been clear is when I post about, say, surgical or anesthesia trauma, I get the most comments that out of anything usually that I post about, because it's so not only misunderstood, but people don't consider that that is a traumatic event that is impacting them 60 years later,
Right.
or 20 years later, or what have you. And so I'm not sure where I got on to that one. Oh yeah, medical trauma,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. The body knows, like to steal Bessel van der Kolk's book title, The Body Keeps the Score. It remembers everything, but the human brain is so clever at suppressing these things. And if this happened to us when we were infants, pre-verbal, so anything kind of under the age of 4-ish, technically people say 3, but I think it's still a little older than that. We're not going to cognitively make a stamp in our memory. This happened to me. It was horrible. I need to work on this stuff to heal and shake it out and get the emotions out. When you're 1 week old, when you're 2 months old, when you're 2 years old, everything that's coming into you is somatic. It's all feeling, it's all sensation, it's all stimulus. And if the signal when you were young was something bad is happening to me, or I feel danger around me, but gosh, these are the only people around me. What's going on in the case of an abusive, neglectful home? Fast forward again to adulthood, and a person wonders, why am I feeling, twitchy when I'm around people? Or why am I so afraid of going into enclosed spaces? This is a common one with people who have been held down for surgical things, or been in an incubator or something, or a CT scan or something where they're terrified and they're having to be very still. Anyway, that's kind of a long way of saying everything does store up in the body, and we're not always going to remember it.
Right. And just to also say how common it is for people to have a lot of stored trauma, and there's so many people now, and there's so many things that I think are contributing. I did a post recently and tagged you in it of like all the things that are contributing to chronic illness, chronic disease. And on that list, I had to include the stored trauma, because I love the way you explain it, of how it just kind of slows the whole system down, right? Can we talk about that just a little bit of how just, surgical trauma, or maybe just a known trauma, how would that slow down our system and make us more prone to disease?
It comes down to how there's a balance between what we would call the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So if I do a quick crash course, basically there's our central nervous system is our brain and our spinal cord, and we need those things. And then coming out of the brain are the cranial nerves, and coming out of the spinal cord are all of the other nerves, the spinal nerves that allow me to move my arms, allow me to pick up this glass of water, allows me to turn my head and look at you, and I can like wink at you and do all sorts of things. So these nerves are created. They create this sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. I'm simplifying, but essentially, in addition to the nerves that function for eating, drinking, moving, digestion, we have nerves for survival. And we have nerves for automatic processes like blood pressure, like digestion, like hormonal release, sweating, right? Shivering when we're cold, the dilation of our pupils, all these sorts of things. And so we need to have survival. If there's something scary happening, if something's coming at us really fast, we want to, automatically protect our brain, our head, scoop up our kid, away from that dog that's about to bite them, whatever it might be. We need to have this fight, flee, fight, flight, which is the sympathetic nervous system. Adrenaline, go, 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 protect. But then there's this other part called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that is often misunderstood. And this is one of the ways when someone doesn't quite get how the nervous system works, is they'll say the parasympathetic nervous system is rest digest. I know that that's partially true.
Partially, right.
Right. So part of the parasympathetic nervous system is rest digest, and that is dictated by this vagus nerve and it being in a certain tone. I like to say more like a standard car, a certain gear. The same engine, it's just in a different gear. And so rest digest is like humming at neutral, not using a lot of gas, just chilling out, blah, blah, is hanging. And that is where we repair. That's where we build up our immunity. That's where regeneration occurs. I think that's where, in learning with you and Carrie, for example, Bennett, that's where the melatonin comes in.
Yep.
When we're sleeping, to repair and regenerate and all those sorts,
yes.
right? So that's part, but then the other part of the parasympathetic nervous system, there's two more, is the ventral vagal, which is the social engagement. That's the ability for us to see someone and go, oh no, they look really sad.
Yeah.
Or, oh wow, there must be something really cool happening because they just have this glow on their face. It's also what a mother, as you know, as a mom, and again, to be future mom, you will connect and attune with your newborn baby.
Oh yeah.
And be like, hey there, little guy. Or if they're in distress, it'll be like, uh-oh, what's going on? And you figure out through that social engagement, and then they see you. And through your connection with them, they learn self-regulation, and that builds up that part of the parasympathetic that is this social engagement, and that helps us self-regulate. That's another portion. But then there's this portion of the parasympathetic that distinguishes, or I should say, that is differentiated from that low tone dorsal I mentioned a little while ago, that rest digest. It's called high tone dorsal. So there's low tone, that's rest digest, neutral, humming, chilling, relaxing. And then there's high tone. I changed my voice with that. High tone. High tone is like shock.
Yeah.
Uh-oh, I'm bleeding out, literally, artery is bursted. I got to lower my blood pressure. Heart rate has to come down, or I'm seeing something that is terrifying and I have to shut down. It's too much. It's too much for me to take in. I can't process what I'm feeling. It's what leads to fainting. POTS, for example, which is sadly more common these days.
Very common these days.
Yeah. Is this basically this inability for the autonomic nervous system to maintain blood pressure in changing of movement. If I was to get up and stand, I know, because I know my system, I'm not going to get lightheaded and dizzy. Right. So POTS is this parasympathetic dorsal, high tone dorsal, and sympathetic kind of like at odds with each other in a way, but there's this preponderance to this freeze, to this shutdown, to this high tone protection. So when we say fight, flight, now people are saying, which is cool, fight, flight, freeze. We've added that. And then the freeze is this deep, deep, quick slowing down that is very fast. It is very clumsy, but it's protective, it's survival. And so to answer your question about the chronic illnesses and this slowing down, in many ways, think of the system, the human system has two things going on. There is a deep, deep fight, flight that's running, going. I'm terrified, but then I can't display this terror and this fight, and I can't punch everybody in the room, even though I want to. So what do? I freeze her down. I go into this high tone dorsal of the parasympathetic to keep in check. But what's that doing is that is basically creating dysregulation. That's what nervous system dysregulation is. You've got this gas on fight, flight, but it's not getting emitted. It's not getting expressed. It's not getting integrated. So you have to shut it down with this deep dive of the parasympathetic, this high tone dorsal. And it's kind of like gas on, brake on of a car engine. And over time, it's just going to break down.
Yep. Hey guys, just a quick little break to say thank you so much for watching and being a subscriber of this channel. I really and truly do appreciate you. If you are enjoying this video or finding the content helpful, please do share this video with a friend. Make sure you give it a like. Make sure you leave Irene and I a comment below, and it will help to get this out to more people. Again, there are several things down in the show notes for you today regarding Irene's programs and that special little introductory program that she's doing to help people who might be on the fence about jumping into some of this deeper nervous system work. Now, a quick little shout out to one more sponsor of mine, Upgraded Formulas. Now, one of the things that can happen when you do have a lot of stored trauma, a lot of stress, is a serious mineral imbalance. This is due to chronic stress for a lot of people. It can also happen when you try to do a lot of carb restriction or just calorie restriction in general. And 80% of people actually have a mineral deficiency, according to Dr. Leland Stillman, who will be back on the podcast again later this month. So if you're curious about whether or not you have a mineral deficiency and you want something that is more accurate than a blood test, a hair tissue mineral analysis with a consultation from Upgraded Formulas is the way to go. Now you can use my code YOGI12 to save on that hair tissue mineral analysis with a consultation, or Yogi if you have used that code before. And again, this is the best way to start to replenish those minerals, because if you start supplementing with something that your body doesn't necessarily need, you can throw your minerals even more out of balance and cause more health problems for yourself. So thank you again to Upgraded Formulas for sponsoring today's episode. Speaking of which, let's get back to it.
And so the last piece I'll add, and then I'll take a break from talking, is when you are living in this state of high tone dorsal, high level of freeze, along with sympathetic adrenalized fight flight, you're not getting that good nurturing low tone rest digest. The system is kind of being co-opted for pure survival. So there's very little time and there's very little opportunity for the system to repair, for the gut lining to repair, for there to be immune enhancing functions going on when we're slumbering at night. A person might be able to sleep like a log, even though they're in this dysregulation, but they're going into sleep in what we would call a frozen state. And it's often that person that says, I go to sleep, I don't even remember falling asleep, but then I wake up and I feel like I've been hit by a ton of bricks. I don't feel rejuvenated. I don't feel rested. And that's a sign that, yeah, you slept 12 hours, but you were tense. And we even like the jaw, teeth grinding. This is a very common thing in our culture.
Oh yeah, I hear teeth grinding all the time.
And so that is synonymous in some ways with restless leg, with waking up in a panic attack, being afraid at night, not being able to go to sleep. It's the body literally chewing on the tensions of either the day or a lifetime, and it not expressing, it not getting out. And just the other day, I had one of our students say, I don't grind my teeth anymore after doing this work because my system is more regulated. So there isn't that tension at night. The person is going into sleep actually in a low tone dorsal rest digest space, which also means that their breathing apparatus is going to be more chill. In my personal experience, I do believe that a lot of sleep apnea is a result of unresolved trauma, especially around surgical trauma where there's been intubation. I've done so much with my sleep and ease of sleep through working with these layers of having tubes in my throat and all that kind of stuff. So there's this interesting interplay between this dysregulation, high sympathetic, high tone dorsal of the vagus nerve, and it just being on all the time. And then think of this, Sarah, like over a lifetime. So say the insults were when you were 5 or 6 or 10 or in utero or infancy. And there's just no, we go to school to learn history and math and all these things, but there's no training to teach kids or parents how to shift out of these intense experiences so that we're not going out into adulthood living in survival, basically. Or the other one we call is functional freeze, where you are functioning, air quotes, but there's this frozen nature. And it actually reminds me when you said you're in this yoga class and you're like, get me out of here, in many ways, your system was more accurately doing what it needed. Because my sense is there were a lot of people in that class who were feeling what you were feeling, but they were better at like pushing it down and overriding their desire. And they are dissociating, not just in their mind, but in their body. They're going into more of a functional freeze. So so does that answer the question about the slowing down and the chronic illness?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I've yet to meet somebody that has either an autoimmune issue or some sort of a low-lying issue, even diabetes, which is huge these days. I meet more and more, and I know you've done some work around diabetes, like it's exploding. And, of course, changing our diet is going to help tremendously.
More exercise, definitely.
However, and then circadian rhythms and artificial light and all that stuff, we have to look at things as a whole. But there, sometimes there's just that last little piece. And I feel like it's, and it can be actually the first piece that they deal with. And then the rest of it is a lot easier to manage.
I'm convinced of that because I just did an interview with one of our students, one of your peers. Sandra is her name, and she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes later in life. They thought it was type 2, but it was actually type 1. And we'll link her story. I'll make sure you get that. But what she calls it emotional diabetes. And what she found is, as she learned the curriculum that we teach through Smart Body, Smart Mind, and she's learning about her vagus nerve and social engagement and orienting, which is really one of the key pieces that is simple, but not, depending on a person's state of being and where they are. But what she found is when she was engaged in conversation, hiking, walking, her blood glucose wouldn't spike. And because she would wear this monitor, I'm not sure how it works, but she could see it. And even just thinking about connecting with her estranged mother who's way past and all that kind of thing, but just thinking about that, how do I say this? So, you have this upbringing that wasn't good, and we know that, or she knows that, there wasn't intense abuse and physical abuse and violence, but there's that classic, cold, stiff upper lip, no emotions are talked about, those sorts of things, which is really traumatizing to a little person.
Definitely.
And I don't even like calling it little t, because as we found, that stuff can be harder to uncover than the person who knows darn well they were absolutely neglected and attacked, let's see, as a child over and over again. But what she found was that when she, and I might get this a little wrong, sorry, Sandra, but when she connected to the idea or the image, the imprint of a mother or her mother in a good, healthy way, she literally would see her blood glucose stabilize.
Wow.
Without insulin, like she takes insulin, but not, she can manipulate it. It's very much like we know that we can shift through our breathing patterns, our heart rate, and all these sorts of things. And I kind of look at that and I go, isn't that interesting? But then when we look at the ACE study, Adverse Childhood Experiences study, which is kind of the seminal study that put this on the map, that early adversity creates adult illness, no matter how you want to cut it. Diabetes is one of the key illnesses that they found with greater ACE score, as well as heart disease, cancer, autoimmune, osteoarthritis, addiction. Just the list is long.
Yep.
So I do feel that when someone can get the nervous system work down, doesn't mean you still don't want to eat well.
Right.
And get outside.
Right.
And exercise and keep your muscle mass up, and all these things are important. You got to still take care of the physical medium of the body.
Yep.
But what I found is that the willingness to do it is a little higher, because you're not working with all this stored resistance that is survival energy or shutdown. When someone is living in a deep shutdown and functional freeze and they don't know it, the classic thing is, I just can't get motivated.
Right.
I'm looking at all this stuff and I know I'm supposed to cook the meal or go outside, and I just keep diverting to something else. But at the end of the day, our system wants to be healthy.
Yeah.
And my students, your peers, and you know this, there becomes this desire to take care of oneself when we start to lift this intensity of the survival stress that's been with us for so long.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Totally. I mean, there's so many downstream effects from that. You kind of deal with the nervous system, not necessarily deal with it, but you work with the nervous system in a contained and safe way. And a lot of things start to shift and change for you. I've talked so much about my own transformation of, going on my fertility journey and losing 30 pounds and making all these changes. Yes, I was very motivated to get healthy, to have the baby and all the things that I did. But doing Smart Body, Smart Mind, we finished it right about the time weight just started falling off of me, and everyone's like, what's the secret? I'm like, well, it's not really a huge secret. I changed a lot of things, but that nervous system work was pretty foundational for me in getting to that place, because I kind of had an idea of like these are kind of the things I need to be doing.
Yeah.
But I have so many people that have this conversation with me. They're like, I know what I need to do. I need to be out for sunrise. I need to be having more outdoor time. I need to eat healthier. I know what I need to be eating. I just can't do it. I just don't know how to do it. I can't do it. And I feel like that nervous system piece is just so, so huge for them. And it's not something that you can hack, because trust me, like I have tried to biohack everything. And typically biohacking for me has been disastrous, let's skip breakfast every day and just drink black coffee. Well, then my adrenals are totally shot out. And I'm like, well, what happened? Because there's not a shortcut. You have to do it the right way. But I think that, just part of my journey last year was the Smart Body, Smart Mind. And I did have to go through, oh God, I had 4 surgeries last year. I was under anesthesia 4 times. Yeah. Because I had 2 pregnancies that we had to do surgeries because of those. And then I had 2 IVF retrievals where I had to go under anesthesia for both of those. And there's a lot of emotion, tons of emotion tied to all 4 of those. Just so much emotion. And I think if I didn't have the nervous system work and the safe container of Smart Body, Smart Mind and all of that stuff, I probably would have gone in a different direction.
Well, I mean, this is anecdotal, but I have no doubt, because if I think about all the surgeries I had before I knew this work, I don't know what was going on in my body, in my emotions. I'm pretty certain, Sarah, I never cried once. and not because my body didn't want to. I just don't think I knew how, and I didn't know how to advocate for myself. I was younger. And so I do think that when we're healthier, we can detox the anesthesia much easier, but asking questions, asking the nurses to slow down. I need a minute, orienting, not just rushing back into things right after, like all the things that you do naturally because of your routines. And then the embodiment of knowing how to listen to your kidneys and adrenals and all these little things, it all contributes so that we can integrate and come out of something like 4 anesthesia is pretty good.
Yeah.
Like that's amazing, actually.
And I think being okay with letting the emotions out. And like you said, the not crying, when the last round of IVF, we found out it didn't work. I thought I was home alone.
Yeah. Oh, you told me this. Yeah. This is good.
I was not home alone, but I was just having like a scream fest in my bedroom because I just needed to. Like I didn't want to, it was like in my body, it needed to come out. I was having like this crazy scream fest, and my husband was home. And he came back and he's like, oh my gosh, we don't need to keep trying for the baby. It's okay. I've never seen you this upset in the whole, like almost 20 years I've known you. I've never seen you this upset before. And I'm thinking, I probably have been this upset over something before in the time that you've known me, but I've never allowed my body to release it. I've never let it out because I've been told that we don't do that, and we just kind of push it down. But I think that was part of the healing and understanding how to do that in a safe way, and letting that kind of work through me. I think that was part of, again, that healing journey that did allow me to have a baby without using IVF. I think that was a big part of it. But yeah, we're not, it's not okay to do that. You're stiff upper lip, stuff it down, don't cry about it.
What's happening, I'm seeing more and more, and maybe I'm biased because I'm in my circles of people who are getting this stuff.
Yeah.
But I mean, at least now there's more people who understand that holding in emotion, whether it's anger, sadness, or even joy, right? That is creating toxicity inside of the body. But as you said, my sense is, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you screamed, you didn't be like, okay, I'm going to get myself prepared. No. It just came out.
It happened.
It happened because your system has greater regulation. And this is where that biohacking thing comes in really nicely, because I haven't been to an in-person workshop in a long time for some reasons, but I find them harder now when they're more self-development, because they'll get people to do things like emit emotions or hit things or do partner work that's just way too intense.
Yeah.
And you might get through the motions of, hitting that baseball bat on the pillow that you've been given. But if it's not matched with your internal physiology's desire to do that,
right,
it ain't going to do anything. It might be a good shoulder manipulation, to get things moving, but it's not actually going to integrate real trapped anger, aggression. It has to come out spontaneously, just like a volcano erupts spontaneously. It's not saying, okay, today we're going to do all the preparations so that we, it starts to emit steam and and then it happens. It's not preparing consciously, or maybe it is, I don't know, maybe that's a weird example, but when it comes to the human, we have gotten so far away from it, because someone might, well, why can't I just go boxing or hit a pillow? And it's like, you can do that, but if you're not connecting it with this interoception, which is a fancy word for how you sense your internal sensations and emotions, it's not going to create the release that actually integrates and heals that stored trauma, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it is one of those things that I know people are frustrated with, because they want that quick fix. They know they're holding in anger. They know they haven't cried in 10 years. And I'm like, yeah. And you got to start with the ABCs and the 1, 2, 3s. And then with time and commitment, you will find yourself one day in a pool of tears without realizing that you've just done that, or you'll have a scream fest that is completely natural. And you've just released so much pressure that maybe was in the system before you were born, like generationally.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I think just, again, doing it in that safe and contained manner, and not just going on to YouTube and trying to, I've seen people say, well, let's ice the vagus nerve to get it healthy. Have you seen that?
Oh my God, no.
Yeah, I saw this influencer.
That's impossible.
Yeah, I saw this influencer talking about it. She's also pregnant, and she's like, yeah, I'm keeping my vagus nerve healthy during pregnancy. I'm icing my vagus nerve during pregnancy. I'm like, and she's got like almost 100,000 followers, and she's teaching. Yeah.
Like putting it at the base of the brainstem kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it is, but you're not touching it. That's
it was interesting. I'm like,
oh, bless.
like, that's not really what you do, but yeah. There's just a lot of misinformation out there about how we go about these things. And then like you're on your end, you see people having adverse reactions to these like vagus nerve exercises, or, can we talk about that a little bit, kind of what you've seen?
Well, as I mentioned at the top of our chat, this desire to, it's really interesting. I'm just, you ask that question, I kind of take a step back and go, how did that happen? But I think, that old game that we used to play when we were kids, what was it called? Telephone or?
Oh yeah. My husband and I talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Where you whisper something into someone's ear and then it goes around, and by the time the person says it and
it's
has
like
nothing.
Something totally different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's something like that going on right now. And I think one of the reasons, I'll speak more theoretically as to where I think this has happened, and then we'll get into that piece. Everyone knows that trauma is important to heal.
Yes.
We all know, well, not all of us, but we know the research is pretty darn conclusive. Even people like Gabor Mate have said on the record, there's no need to do any more research to study how to cure cancer. Like we know why it's caused. And I know many people won't like me saying that, but except for the mildest, tiniest true genetic, like you have no hope of changing this, which I think things can always change. There's no need to keep researching, because we know that this trauma piece, this dysregulation of the nervous system is huge. And then we also have a lot of the science that's been done by Stephen Porges, who really put on the map this idea of the vagus nerve and the polyvagal theory and neuroception, which is our perception of danger in the environment and safety. And so there's that piece. And then there's this trauma piece. And it's like, well, okay, if dysregulation happens because of trauma, and part of dysregulation is the vagus nerve, then we must just go to the vagus nerve and fix it so that we can heal the trauma.
Right.
But what is left out is the fascia.
Yes.
The body, the social engagement capacities, the way our posture is, the way our ability to actually listen to hunger cues, like all these autonomic pieces that happen in our body. That is all that, like, it's this big, I don't know how to say it more, clearer than it's just a huge system that has to be worked with in whole, not just one piece. And, to pick up on that cancer piece, another thing that Gabor Mate said that was just so brilliant a while ago was, you can't cure cancer by just studying the cell. The same way you can't solve a traffic jam by studying how the internal combustion engine works, i.e. the car. right? Like you're not going to solve a traffic jam by figuring out how an engine works. And so if everyone's following this multiple analogy piece I'm putting together, if we think of can't study the cell to cure cancer, you can't just work with the vagus nerve to figure out the trauma that's stored.
Yes.
And by only looking at, say, our poor vagus nerve, we're just beating it down. If we just look at the vagus nerve and we try to stimulate it with these toning exercises, we're missing out on the fact that one of the best ways to activate the vagus nerve has nothing to do with stimulating the parts that go to the gut. It's just looking around, orienting. That's why the orienting exercises are so pivotal for so many people, because it's almost like a homeopathic dose of vagus nerve work. Like we're just going to do a little bit. It's not even going to spark up the deeper elements of the vagus. We're going to work with the social engagement system. And I'm going to get you to slowly feel your head and neck move, which is where that vagus nerve comes out in the brainstem. I'm not going to tell you to ice it. I'm going to tell you to slowly look and see and acknowledge what you're seeing around you. And I'm not saying in that, and we're working with the vagus nerve, just like you're going to have your newborn baby when he is a little fussy because he needs something. You're not going to say, hey, little baby, I need you to take 10 deep breaths.
Right.
You could try it, Sarah. Let me know if it works. I don't think it's going to work.
I've had a baby before and they don't typically respond to that sort of thing.
So why would we as adults try to treat the body and self-regulate it with these techniques?
Right.
We have to treat it as the intelligent system that it is and give it the cues, the information to reconnect, one with the outside world, one with the internal world, and then one, two, three, to connect all of it together. And I liken it to learning a new language. You know, you can't just learn a new language by knowing the letter A. You have to know all of the letters and a little bit more to be able to learn a new language. And so what occurs, as I had mentioned earlier, when we try to just focus on one of these exercises to stimulate the vagus at that deeper gut level, which is what the toning essentially is doing, and the throat level, is if the rest of the system isn't ready for that level of activation, it's going to tell you. And that's why, right? That's why that individual had this drop in temperature. They went into depression. So that means that high tone dorsal that I mentioned, the freeze, their desire was to spark up the vagus nerve because they were told this will help heal the nervous system. But they missed this part that you can also drive the system into that deep gear of shutdown because it doesn't have the proper connections to handle that level of activation. And so often, if I think about Smart Body, Smart Mind, the way that curriculum is designed, we say to people over and over again, if you go into any of the lessons and you feel that it's too much in the first minute, you press pause and you stop.
Yep.
And that's actually better than trying to white knuckle it through something.
Yep.
Because then your system is going into a space that it's not ready, and we don't know what's going to happen when you come out the other side.
Exactly.
Right? It's like you leaving that yoga class. Imagine if you had just stayed in that class and buttoned yourself up. You might have ended up with like a migraine afterwards, or your gut might have gotten worse than it already was, or who knows, right?
Yeah. And that was the crazy thing about when I was an actual yoga teacher training, because there was a lot of that. There was a lot of forcing, you know, to be in a room with the same 12 people from Friday at 4 p.m. until Sunday at 5 p.m., you know, same people over and over again, doing these types of exercises. My gut in teacher training was a wreck. I mean, I was bloated all the time. That's when a lot of my digestive trouble started, was when I was in yoga teacher training in 2012, or no, it was earlier. It was like 2011, but still, yeah, that, and I just, now I'm like thinking back, like, because when I was in that training, I was frustrated a lot to have to be kind of forced through these like longer practices.
Yeah.
I didn't mind doing the athletic stuff. I wanted to be, that's what I wanted to do. But it was when it was like, let's slow down and do this movement really slowly. And this, and I'm like, I want to stab you, you know? And yeah, when you override like the non-yoga teacher, like, you know,
but it's accurate. That's the thing. That's your fight.
Yep.
You're slowing it down so much that you're feeling the stored survival stress. And then this is where we get into trouble in a lot of these spiritually bypassed communities is, oh, that's so wrong. You should never want to hurt. And I'm like, I don't want Sarah to go and murder her yoga teacher.
Right.
But it's understanding that we're still animals. Like everyone's wanting to become these ascended masters. It's like, great. But as far as I can see, we're in this physical body for a while, like until this light being world. I don't know. I actually like enjoying food and smelling and moving my body and all those sorts of things that come with the body. But again, this is where that education piece is so important, because someone might be sitting in that room thinking, I think I must be mentally ill.
Right.
I'm having these visions of wanting to strangle every single person in this class.
Right.
I must be psychotic.
Right.
And here's the thing. In some cases, someone might actually go and be violent because they don't know how to contain and figure out what that is. And that's why I do think we have the violence that we have.
Oh, yeah.
It's not because that person wants to hurt.
Right.
Like consciously, their unconscious wants to hurt others because they probably were hurt themselves and never were taught how to deal with all of these animal qualities that we have.
Yeah.
Right. So I get a chuckle because it's I hope that world is starting to wake up to the importance of the physiology, and that there is sacredness in a really well-taught yoga class and a practice and meditation. But we also have to balance it with the fact that we're still human.
We're animals. And that's, largely why I've kind of stepped out of the yoga community, was because of this. You can't be an animal, you can't be part of the food chain. You can't eat meat. You can't do this because it's against yoga, blah, blah, blah. And I just got so sick of it. And I'm like, everyone is like spiritually bypassing. Everyone is not acknowledging that we are animals, that we have basic needs. And I just can't do this. And it's crazy because since I've kind of started my page, I have had a few teachers that used to be my teachers that have found it, and they followed me, but they're like, I love what you're doing. I love
in DM, probably not on
in
the
DM, not in, one of them owns a popular Ashtanga studio, so there's that. But I have gotten teachers that I respected that have been in the industry for 20, 30 years that are like, I really respect what you're doing. I like it. It was a little weird at first. I'm like, really, is she doing this? But now it makes a lot of sense. So I think people will come around it. The community as a whole, though, I'm just like, okay, I'm going to focus on something else.
Well, and it's shifting now, I'm finding, to kind of the breathwork communities and medicine communities. And like I said before, as a practice, as an activating practice that is specific for a specific thing, sure.
Yep.
When I get into my cold plunge, I play with my lungs, like I'm playing with my breathing and feeling, but I'm not doing it because I'm trying to figure out an emotion.
Right.
Or trauma.
Right.
It's like we have to have more nuance in this. But what I have seen, and I've had verification from people in those worlds, is that it's almost taken over that mind, body, yoga, meditation world. and there's still a lot of bypassing going on.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of unrefined guidance, might be the way to say it,
Yeah.
where I'm seeing images in these retreats where the facilitator is with the person and everyone is on the ground, like blindfolded,
Oh my gosh.
and they're catharting and emoting with the person who's emoting. And again, it's your choice. If that's how you want to teach and lead people through ceremonial retreats, okay. But as a practitioner, you can't do that with every single person.
No.
You'll burn out, and I believe you'll take on if you're not careful. And it's just not, again, I've been into so many trainings and watched intense work through the masters, Peter, Kathy, all my, all these things. And you don't want to blindfold someone.
No.
And you don't want, you want it to be organic and connected to the world, because you don't know, you won't see if their eyes are glazing over.
Right. You can see a
and
lot
going
from the
in
eyes.
and going into a deeper shutdown.
Yep.
Because you can be in a shutdown free state and still, and I'm going to make it louder, like do these things, right?
Yep. Oh,
and so that's I guess you could say one of my pet peeves is I'm seeing again, sounds like I'm just knocking it all, but I'm like, I want to know if that person's physiology is actually engaged socially, or if they're just going through a cathartic release that looks cool and might give them a sense of euphoria because they're being matched with this equal euphoria from the practitioner or the coach or the facilitator. But I want to know what else is going on after.
Yep.
Are they connected to the body, or are they slightly in a bit more of a bypass now? Yeah. And so they feel that it's much better because they are a bit more bypassed. And so they've numbed out a little bit of the pain, which brought them to that said retreat.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Totally. It totally does. Yeah. And I think, like what you're saying, there can be a time and a place for these things.
Yeah.
I still firmly believe that the ice plunging helped me tremendously after the surgeries, but it was done in a way that, I'm having a scream fest, I'm acknowledging what's going on in my body. And when I'm in the freezing cold 32-degree water, I'm feeling what's going on.
Yes.
I'm like, this is what Adrienne, she says it. She's like, this is what cold feels like,
Yeah.
I'm cold. This is how my body feels. Like I'm in the situation, and I'm not just like, you see people before they jump into a cold tub and they're like, doing all the like raging and like jumping up and down. And then they're like, and they get in, and you're like, oh my gosh, you're not
right.
You're supposed to be, not
connected.
Be connected to what you're doing, connected to this situation. I know it's crazy what you're doing and all of that, but you want to be connected to the scenario. If not, your body, it's going to probably whack out your body.
Well, that's an interesting one, because if you have to hype yourself up that much,
you probably shouldn't be doing it.
That you probably might not be ready for it. Because you also don't want to go in and completely shut down, because I think that's also what a lot of people do, and they don't realize that they're actually the therapeutic benefit, in my opinion, isn't happening if you're having to put yourself into a more heightened state of survival stress. Right. Because I believe fully in the cold therapeutics. It's very clear that it offers a very important activation to the system. But again, it has to be done on a case-by-case basis. I am not going to ask someone who can't even handle going out of their house to go into a freezing cold ice bath. No. It's like, like just start with a warm, like just get into the shower. I'm doing I'm designing a cold therapy course right now. And
part of that is, do you have autoimmune conditions? Do you have, we go through a list of things that someone might have. And then how do they approach the cold? Maybe you fill up, do a beginner, you fill up a bowl of ice water and just start with your wrists. That's step one. And then maybe you eventually put your face in the bowl. After a couple weeks of being okay with the wrists, like not every, some people can just go straight into the ice water. They're healthy enough. Nervous system is healthy enough, but I've seen people go into ice bath way too soon. And then they're like, I'm exhausted and I can't sleep and my hormones are even worse. And it's like, this like one of those things, there's all these great benefits, but if you don't approach it the right way for you, again, it's not going to help.
Well, the dive reflex is a real thing, right? That's why the big fishies in the ocean can stay in ice cold water forever. Their nervous systems are built for that level of cold.
Right.
And we have that evolutionary button. It's not a button. I'm just using that as a term, where if we are in cold water, our system goes into this dive reflex and it goes into that high tone dorsal that I mentioned. And so that is actually part of the therapeutic benefit. But if you are not attuned to your physiology in that, you're gonna do something that could potentially lead you to more shutdown. And when you said your people were, or the people that were more fatigued and couldn't sleep, my sense is they were spiking their cortisol and then it was just dropping.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you do get that adrenaline burst. Which for some people can be a great thing. You feel more alert, you feel more engaged, but it's too much and then too much. And it's.
And it can become addictive too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Which is another thing that's not good. And I see a lot of this with kind of I know we've talked about it before, people doing like the TRE, the shaking and just anything where you're kind of like what you were saying, you're kind of forcing your body to do these things because it's part of the therapy. And for some people, it can shift them into a different place in the nervous system that's not positive.
TRE is an interesting one because I do have some colleagues who are trained in that as well. And they have said that some of it can be useful to get people into their bodies. And I have no doubt that that's true. These are respected folk that I know. But then I also know of people who have done it quite religiously in our practitioners. And it's, and this was when I was in private practice, it's very hard, I found, to work with some of these individuals because the moment they went to feel into their bodies, they would just start shaking. And then there'd just be this tremor that wouldn't go away because that was just what they were taught. And it got to a point where I would just ignore it. Because I'm like, this isn't actually, if it was completing something, as you've learned, survival, procedural memory, a running, a fight, a flee response, it would shake and then you don't need to shake again. In that way. Right. And so because there's a part of me that wonders if we never added that to someone's toolkit and we just taught them the foundations from day one, ground zero, would they find that release in a more organic way as opposed to trying to go in and get it going,
make it happen?
And I know, again, through just hearing the stories of my students, they'll have these spontaneous tremors come out, but they're not trying to make it happen.
I had that after, I think, one of my losses that happened to me. I was crying, I was upset, and I realized I was having like these little tremors, but because I was in nervous system work, I wasn't freaked out about it. I just allowed it to happen. And now I'm like, oh, we're just going to go with this. My body is releasing this really effing traumatic thing that's happening right now. And so I'm going to go with it. So I think it has to come from an organic place.
That's my thing. I mean, again, everyone's got their own journey. And again, this biohack concept that we started out with, I get it. I so get it. I get that a person wants to figure out a faster way to get that release. But again, look at the system. It's like a whole.
Yeah.
And the one thing I do know for sure is the more and more capacity a person builds to be with their body, these things start to come through and out much more organically. And it's also more gentle on the body.
Much more gentle. Yeah. Well, I've been really enjoying this topic. And, one of the things that we talked about before we turned the camera on is that you're doing something a little bit different. I've mentioned smart body, smart mind a few times, so I'll definitely make sure I link that down in the show notes for anybody listening. But some people are like, okay, this is an investment of my time, financially. So you're offering something a little bit different right now that they can kind of understand this work on a deeper level. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So like you said, we're going to run Smart Body, Smart Mind, which is the program you did, was like 2 years ago now, I think, or 3 years ago.
2021.
Okay.
Actually. Yeah. So
a year and a bit ago.
Yeah. Yep.
So we're running that as per normal. That registration opens on the 13th of September. And it's just open for 1 week this round. We're making it a tighter window because we want to finish before Christmas. It's a 12-week course. So that's its thing. But what we're going to do, what I'm going to offer and teach is a 4-class series in lead up to that registration opening. And so on the 9th, it's actually technically the 10th of September, 11th, 12th, and 13th, I'm doing a 4-class series on Zoom. While it's at 11 a.m. Pacific, it's one of those things where we record if you can't make it live. And I'll be teaching something called the essentials. And it's kind of how it sounds. I'm going to go through what I believe to be the essential things that one should learn at the outset so that they get kind of a macro view of how important the nervous system is, what the nervous system is, the different types of traumas that we have. I'm going to pull in that swimming pool beach ball analogy that I love.
I love that one too.
To explain capacity and growing capacity. We're going to talk about some specifics around sabotage, self-sabotage, and how that connects to unhealed trauma. And then also, again, this is going to sound jargony, but the real bread and butter of Smart Body, Smart Mind is something called sequencing or neuroplastic healing. So making sure that we learn and practice in a way that's sequenced and isn't all over the place, right? And again, this goes back to this idea of how are we relearning about our body, our physiology in a way that is sequenced, that is organized so that we're getting the things in the right order. Very similar to how a newborn baby, we're not going to teach it how to walk on day 1. If anything, you shouldn't teach your baby how to walk. They'll figure it out on their own, right?
Right, exactly.
Like we're going to just start with these basic pieces. So I'll be talking about that. It's called The Essentials. It's $47. And then each day, each class, I'll also do a Q&A in addition to the live teaching session. And then when we get into the following week, we'll be doing a few more sort of special topic lectures and talking to some alums. So it's going to be a live opportunity to learn from me. So you're not having to dive through all of my videos, which I still suggest, if you want to go crazy on my videos, please do on YouTube. There's a lot there, but it can be overwhelming when you're trying to figure out, do I want to do this? Or maybe I need to wait, or I'm not sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I love that because I get a lot of people that ask me, I've tried this, I've tried that, and I'm like, have you looked at the nervous system component? I get a lot of people who are like, I want to do the carnivore keto diet to deal with my eating disorder. And I'm like, let's not do that.
Good on you, Sarah.
I want you to, here's my friend Irene's channel. Here's her programs. I want you to look at this. I don't want you to worry about your diet right now. Okay. And the first thing people, oh, I just don't know, so I love that you're offering this. I know of like 5 or 6 people I'm going to be sending it to. So anybody that's listening, I think this is a really great opportunity to try to understand this type of work a little bit deeper, especially if anything that we've said has resonated with you, because it's definitely been something that it's been really helpful for me, and I continue to integrate it into my life every day. So
me too.
Yeah.
It's ongoing.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I'll add, it's like, this is the opposite of the biohack, because we're always healing.
Yeah.
We're always repairing, even if we're not sick or unwell, things are always turning over in the system. And it really is pretty neat when a person has agency and can understand what's going on in their body.
Yeah.
And also other people. That's one thing we haven't talked about, but when you understand humanity from the lens of the autonomic nervous system, there is a level of compassion. It doesn't mean you don't get a little crazy sometimes when you see weird behavior, but you then understand why that behavior is happening.
Yeah.
Especially with kids, the parents from the class. Oh my gosh. Like that stuff just warms my heart, because I hear these stories about these children whom the parents are like, oh God, I really did a bad thing when they were, I had no idea. And I'm like, it's okay. Just work on yourself. And then they'll come back and they'll say, holy cow, little person is like actually eating their food. They're actually connecting. And it's not rocket science. It's just humanity. It's attunement. It's alignment. It's letting them be what they need to be. But it's very hard for a parent to let that happen when they don't allow their own bodies to be how they're supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly. I'm so excited to have this kind of knowledge bank going into motherhood this time versus the last time where it was like a shit show of like, I don't know what the hell's going on.
Oh, I'm excited for you.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. And just the relationship with my husband, we just went to the beach, little family trip, and we were walking on the beach, and he's like, sometimes I look back and I wish we could go back to when Alexis was little, my daughter, she's 15, I'll be almost 15 in December. I wish we could go back. But he's like, I feel like our relationship now is just a million times better. And I'm like, how many people can say that when they have a special needs teenager, that their relationship is better now, than it was 15 years ago? And I attribute a lot of this work to that, because I've been able, and he hasn't done nervous system work, but I have. And I think it's allowed me to just shift in our relationship in a way that's been really healthy for the both of us. Not that I've been having to like bend over backwards or but I understand him so much better. And then I can kind of attune and, not be manipulative, but I can allow things in the relationship, talk through things in a reasonable way. And it's hard to really explain it super beyond that, but our relationship is a lot better just in the last year and a half, for sure.
You are not the only one that says that, whether it's a person that has an actual spouse who they're with and they like versus I've again spoken to a few students who their relationships with their exes is so much better. And it's because they are themselves not getting triggered because they're more regulated and they're attuning, and they're not, like you said, manipulating, pushing. They're listening in a different, it doesn't mean they might not have, a disagreement.
Right.
But there's none of this drama, high school drama dynamic.
Yeah.
But I've heard so many stories recently of students who have husbands. It's usually the girls that do this. But what happens is they're saying the relationship with my husband is just like night and day. And the way I parent my children is just, and so it's like, how is that connected to the vagus nerve? And the thing is, it's all connected.
It is
to that, because you are just becoming more whole. And yes, we're animals physiologically, but then we're human.
Right.
And that's the other part is we are these relational beings that are super complex, because
Mhm.
your husband wasn't raised the way you were, and my
No.
husband wasn't raised the way I was, and we're all raised so differently. And so we have to, from what I've seen, have this knowledge and practice, because up until this point, not many relationships, I would say, get better, as you
Right.
said. Like usually
Yeah.
there's tension, and it's that classic, we just don't talk about it,
Right.
right?
And
Which
yeah.
is so common.
Yeah. And then there's a divorce, you
Yeah.
know, because it's like they can only build for so
Yeah.
long before
Yeah.
both people are just miserable and you can't.
Exactly. And
tolerate
sometimes
it
that's
anymore.
needed,
Yeah,
I've been through one. So
absolutely.
but if you like the person and there's, conflict that's constant and you can't figure out why, look at the nervous system.
Yeah.
And often the other spouse doesn't have to do the work, because it bleeds, it
It
oozes
does.
out in a really interesting way.
Yeah. Happens with a lot of mom, the mom, it's usually the mother of the family.
Yeah.
Not to say that the husband couldn't do the same
Sometimes,
thing.
the guys that have come through Smart Body, Smart Mind are exceptional, because they're really breaking out of this norm of to ask for help means that I'm broken,
Right.
right? To go to therapy means that I'm broken.
Yeah.
And I think that stigma is starting to shift.
Yeah.
But yeah, the guys are still, I feel for them. They need this work just as much as us ladies
Definitely.
do. We all have experienced the human condition and all this experimentation with what humanity is. And
Yeah.
yeah, we're all in it together. So yeah, I don't like to say it's just for women, but when you look, most of our folks are. And then the guys that are there, I just like, yay, another guy.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. I'm going to make sure I link everything down in the
Thank
show
you.
notes so that everyone can find your YouTube, this introductory kind of a Zoom thing that you're going to
Yep.
be doing, Smart Body, Smart Mind, and your other offerings. And yeah, thank you for being here today.
Yay. Thanks, Sarah. It's always so
welcome.
fun to talk.
It really is.